A Japanese man wearing colorful pajamas wakes up in an empty, white room with no doors, windows, or ceiling. When he approaches one of the walls to take a closer look, he discovers something strange protruding from it, a protrusion in the shape of a male member. After poking it a few times, he presses on its head, causing hundreds of little angels to fly out of the ground and walls, laughing and staying there for only a few seconds before returning the way Venus came. However, they leave one thing behind. All of their limbs are now protruding from the walls and floor. This is called the learning stage. When he smells the finger he used to touch the strangely shaped button, the man screams in fear. Then he screams and begs anyone around him to help him, but to no avail. He decided to press different buttons to see what would happen, and each time, a different object would randomly fall into the room, from a small toothbrush to a large vase. Pressing the same button again would give him the same object, and thus testing this concept on a particular button would give him a large pile of chopsticks. However, his joy was short-lived as he pressed the button next to the wand button and a small cart came out of the wall and hit his leg. The next button he pressed after screaming in pain would turn into a but that would hit him in the face. Hours later, the man had accumulated a lot of random objects in the room, and when he threw the ball against the wall, it would press the button that gave him sushi. This made him excited because he was hungry, but he realized that he was lacking some soy sauce. He asked his captors for some, but as usual, he got no response, so he kept pressing one of the buttons until there was a pile of sushi in front of him, but still no sauce. Giving up on, the man continued to eat his sushi, which he found quite delicious, and when he finished, he pressed the extra button, becoming angry when a bottle of soy sauce finally appeared. After angrily pushing the bottle out of the way, he pressed another button and got a pair of old-fashioned 3D glasses. When he put them on, he saw a little angel pointing at his member, and the man was delighted, thinking that he might have found the answer. However, after pressing that particular button, all he got was a countdown timer, and a giant ass appeared from above to fart on him. A few hours later, he had read 5 volumes of the manga, which he found very interesting, but when he pressed the button for the 6th volume, he got the 7th volume instead. Frustrated, he tried other buttons, ending up with 8 and 9. But still no 6. However, the last button he tried brought him a big surprise. It opened a section of the wall that concealed a door behind him. The man celebrated his discovery, but in his excitement, he lost the button that opened the exit. He tried one at random and was surprised to see a member of an African tribe running from wall to wall, the next one dripping water on his head. The third one turned out to be what he needed, and as soon as the wall opened, he ran towards it, only to find it right in front of him. His second attempt ended in the same way, and by he realized that the door would stay open as long as the tip of the arm was down, so he began trying various ways to achieve this. First, he got into a running position, pressing down on it with his foot. Then he hit it with a fly swatter from as far away as he could, hoping that the distance would make the difference in his running time. None of these worked, nor could pulling it with a jump rope or hitting it with air from a fan. His next plan was to get on the cart and push it after pressing the button, but after a few tries, he finally accepted that he had no control over it. What he needed to do was find a way to hold the button down. He placed the giant jar on top, but the button still tried to rise, leading the man to the conclusion that he had to fill the jar to make it heavier. First, he tried the water button, but it was useless. No matter how hard he tried to divert the water, it only fell on him and nowhere else. His next attempt was to fill the jar with sushi, but it became so heavy that he could not even lift it. The neck of the jar was also too narrow for his hand to fit through, so the man had no choice but to use his chopsticks to pick out each piece of sushi. After a while, when he had disassembled enough of the jar, he could barely lift it, so he just did that and moved it closer to the buttons. When he got there, he found himself having to put the jar down on the ground because he had lost which button it was, and when he tried one, the African tribesman stepped out and accidentally touched the base, causing it to crack and break in half. This tipped the man off, who, while panicking and screaming, found the right button and began covering it with sushi. Of course, that didn't work either, and the little member appeared among the rice. The man then tried covering the button with duct tape, then duct tape and a steel plate, but nothing worked. After taking some painkillers to ease the pain the door caused every time it hit his back and taking a nap, the man wanted to brush his teeth, so he pressed the button to get some painkillers. But it was the wrong button and it revealed a rope falling from the ceiling. This immediately improved his mood because it gave him an idea for a new plan. He opened the door, then used the rope to swing across the room and arrive before the door closed. Unfortunately, when he tried to open the door behind the fake wall, he found that it was locked. He returned to the room just in time before the door closed, although she hit him on the way out, and in frustration, he kicked the wall, activating one of the buttons and revealing the key floating in the middle of the room. As with the door, it would disappear when the knob was turned, so the man had to find a way to keep both the key in the room and the door open. But first he had to find the button because he had lost his concentration and lost it. Observing more or less where his foot would touch the wall, he selected a button, but a dog rushed out of the wall and barked at him. The same thing happened with the next button, but luckily the third attempt was successful. While keeping his eyes and one hand pointed at the button, the man stepped back and took a piece of sushi fish and brought it up to the wall to mark the correct button. But when he pressed it, the dog came out again. This time he found the button faster and put his plan into action. He made the rope appear and swung on it to reach different buttons, but still enough. As he fell to the ground, he saw a suction cup that he picked up from one of the many buttons and got an idea for how to solve his little problem. He could use the suction cup to reach the wall and push himself further. After a failed first attempt, the plan worked out well, and a combination of swinging on the rope and pushing himself with the plunger allowed him to press the button, grab the key, press the button and reach the door before it closed. He wasted no time and inserted the key into the lock, turning it quickly, but when he tried to open the door, he discovered an unpleasant surprise. It also had a separate lock on top that required a 3-digit number to open. The man rushed out, was hit by the door as it closed, and in frustration, he threw the plunger at the opposite wall, activating the button that released the African tribe. As he watched him pass, he realized something. Had 3 numbers drawn on his forehead was definitely the combination he needed. Since the time behind the door was limited, man did the whole process by swinging and jumping 3 times, once for each number entered. The third time he was there and opened the door was slightly stuck and he had to push very hard to open it. Finally, when he did, the wall behind him closed, trapping him and no longer having enough room to open the door. Overwhelmed, the man sat down on the ground and began to cry, remembering all the fun he had with the items he had gotten from the buttons. He was locked in there too, but at least he had room to move around and play, and now he realized that he didn't appreciate what he had while he could. Suddenly, he felt a light breeze blowing on his face from the left wall. As soon as he touched it, he discovered a crack that showed it was fake. He wasted no time and opened the control panel before running out of there, quickly reaching a mysterious corridor floating in a completely dark area. It seemed like he was forever running for an exit, and when he finally reached a room, his hair was longer and the color of his pajamas had faded. This room is also empty and the door he uses closes as soon as he enters, but instead of baby angels, there are adult angels who also disappear into the walls, leaving only their limbs exposed, acting as buttons. This is called the practice phase. Meanwhile, in a town in Mexico, a young boy named Antonio's family is worried because his father, a wrestler known as the Snail Man, is acting more taciturn than usual. His wife thinks it might be because his next opponent is much younger than him, but his grandfather points out that it's experience, not youth, that counts. Snail Man is picked up by his daughter, Sister Karen, in her truck, and she drives him to the wrestling ring so he can start his preparations early, which includes changing his clothes and praying to the Virgin. At school, Antonio was bullied by his classmates for betting on Snail Man, and they called him a weak loser. As the game is about to start, Sister Karen returns to her truck and picks up Antonio and their grandfather to take them to see Snail Man play. However, Karen didn't stay, and Antonio and his grandfather found some last seats for themselves just before the show started. The first team to enter the ring was the Northern Tough Ones, consisting of Super Demon and Tequila Joe. Next, Escargot Man and his partner Silver Eagle arrived with the team named Kiss Me a Lot. Silver Eagle was the first to fight for his team with an excellent start, but was soon overwhelmed when the Northern Toughs teamed up to fight him instead of facing him one-on-one. They continued to gesture towards Snail Man, asking him to join the fight, but he refused to do so until Silver Eagle used a ploy to make Super Demon and Tequila Joe punch each other, allowing him to escape. Snail Man was also quickly overwhelmed, but just as his opponent was about to hit him with a chair, the man in the mysterious room pressed the hand and foot button, causing Snail Man to magically stretch his neck and suddenly knocked out both of his opponents. In the room, nothing happened, which caught the attention of the man who continued to press the same button, causing Snail Man to knock out Silver Eagle, the referee, Antonio, and even the bell. Seeing no results, man started trying different buttons. One of them caused the metal band singer to spit fire at his audience during a concert in Los Angeles. The other caused a Russian magician to miss his trick while trying to make his assistant disappear, and the third caused a man in China to bark at his own dog. The man was about to give up when he saw a light shining down from above and noticed that unlike the last room, there was no ceiling here and he could see angels flying in the distance. He decided to try something completely new this time. Instead of pressing the buttons on his limbs, he would use them to climb the walls. It worked, and every time he grabbed a bud with his hands or stepped on it with his feet, something magical would happen on Earth, from flowers blooming to an elephant dying. The higher you go, the more complex the effects become. It's not just nature anymore, but also people and things big and small, like toasters and the moon landing. When he reached the top, the man's hair and beard had grown long, no longer needing to cling to the walls. He could now float, like the angels, and using all the experience he had gained from training in the previous rooms, he assumed his role as God and began to purposefully choose humanity's best shots instead of pressing random buttons. When he finished, he was surrounded by feathers instead of walls, and he entered a glowing portal that took him to the final room. This one had continents on the wall and a giant membership button that the man was about to press. This was the stage known as the future. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, leave a comment about your favorite movie, and we will make it next. Thanks for watching.